Auchentoshan. I feel like, for some reason, it feels like a soap commercial. Auchentoshan, the breeze. I'm Daniel Winnington, Chancellor of Wizard Academy and Whiskey Marketing School, doing a historical Drams comparison, which is why the different intro, thanks to Nathan Huey. So this is a deep dive into Auchentoshan Distillery with a historical release from the 1980s of 10-year-old Auchentoshan single malt. So I'm going to pour these, but first, Auchentoshan Distillery began in 1823 in an area around the edge of Glasgow, whose name means edge of the field, which is fitting because they've been out on the edge of things their entire storyline. Founded by John Bullock, a local corn merchant, who was really unlucky and or had bad timing because he went bankrupt 5 years later, handed it to his son, who went bankrupt 1 year after that. Ooh, all right, this is going to be fun. Ended up selling it to a local family, the Filshie family, under the agreement that John Bullock Sr. was allowed to live on the grounds rent-free until he died, which he died at age 87, so he was there a long time. The new owners held it for 44 years, and in 1877, a disastrous harvest, which the source of grain for the distillery, caused them to have to completely sell the entire thing, even though they had just spent 2 years redeveloping and rebuilding the entire distillery. Then ownership patches to, let me see if I can get this right, Greenock, and then John and George McLaughlin, and then in the 20th century, early 1900s, Glasgow blows up as an industrial powerhouse in the UK. I mean, you got the River Clyde and the shipyards. You got access to all parts of UK. Anyway, Auchentoshan at that point becomes known as Glasgow's malt or Glasgow's whiskey. And then a real small kerfuffle, World War II. Oops. And because Glasgow was a primary location for production, it became a primary target for bombers. As a matter of fact, at one point, over 1,000 people were killed during the Clydebank Blitz, dropping bombs trying to wipe out production in the area. To protect the docks, they turned to the road that's by the distillery and tried to make it look like a river, using like lights and all these kinds of things. And it worked, but it rerouted their path, and it also put Auchentoshan right in the dead path line of the bombing routes. At one point in 1941, I think it was 18 bombs were dropped on the area, wiping out over 1 million liters of whiskey at the Auchentoshan distillery. But somehow, it was still one of the only primary buildings that remained standing, the production building. But one of the cool things about that time is that the production books, if you read them, like the log that shows here's what we did and here's what we didn't do, they tell that story. They have entire pages of production crossed out with a note that says, output lost due to enemy action. That's pretty gnarly. In 1948, they start production again after rebuilding. In 1960, they're bought by J&R Tennant. 9 years later, sold again to the Edie Cairns, a local hotel and restaurant company. And that puts us probably where this bottle is, because this is a 1980s bottle of 10-year-old, which means it was produced in the 1970s, right? Which means it was probably produced during the era it was owned by Edie Cairns, the restaurant hotel company. Because in 1984, Stanley P. Morrison buys them, as in Morrison Bowmore Company, as in Bowmore, right? Bowmore, Isla Scotch, Bowmore, right? So at that point, Stanley, that company owns Auchentoshan as well. That's 1984. That's probably around the time that this was released. I don't know exactly when. So it could have been before it became Morrison Bowmore, or it could have been right after it became Morrison Bowmore. But one of the things that Morrison Bowmore did immediately was refocus entirely, and by the way, so did Edie Cairns, on making this a single malt output instead of just selling crap off to the blenders. And so it was one of the only lowland distillers and one of the few distilleries in Scotland to early on, 80s, 70s, 80s, start putting all of its energy in, or not all, but a lot of energy into single malt Scotch, and also triple distilled, which was not common in Scotland. More common in the 80s and going forward in Ireland. Not common in Scotland at all. Their production, and by the way, now they're Suntory, Beam Suntory. Triple distilled, their third production boosts the proof up into the 80s, right? Like 160s higher, 170s proof. And then it goes into barrels. It gets this really kind of light, creamy, very distinctive, almost delicate. And that's what the 1980s whiskey is. I'm really excited about this one. This is thanks to Nathan Huey. Musty, kind of grainy, little cut grass, honey and hay. Now, I didn't have a 10-year-old Auchentoshan that was modern that I could find, so we're going to be comparing it to the 12-year-old current distillery releases. It smells pretty. Ooh, it is light. Super soft. Feels like really narrow cuts. Really gentle, no long, earthy phenolic. A lot of honey, a lot of hay. Very soft and simple. I think I'm going to get more out of this one. I wonder how much of this is bourbon casks versus sherry casks, because it feels really light touch. Remember, some of these distilleries are still adding color, so we don't know that. I don't know if Auchentoshan adds color, do they? It didn't say it doesn't. Do you know by 2015, they were the only distillery in Scotland doing triple distillation? Yeah, simple but nice on the nose. Oh, way more going on the modern one. By 30%. Easy. Soft, delicate honey cut grass cream. This one, darker, denser, a little more earthy, a little more deep orange. Still soft and delicate, but like darker than this. Oh yeah. This is way better. This is good. This is unoffensive. This is good. Way better. A lot more going on. I'm guessing probably more sherry cask involved because there's a little bit more fruit in there. And it's giving it this like caramel orange mixed with like berries kind of note. I like it a lot more. So what happens to Auchentoshan is they sort of, crack along relatively local and then doing good distribution, but doing a really light touch malt. And so as people in the 80s and 90s started rediscovering single malt, you either found Glenmorangie, which was or Balvenie. Now there starts to be a growth. Diageo does their classic malts range, and so Oban and Lagavulin and all these start hitting the world. But this one's not smoked, not peated, and it's a really light and delicate spirit. It was a really great entry for a lot of people switching from blended whiskeys into single malts without having to struggle. And it became so popular that as we started the school in the early 2013, or late 2013 going in 2014, 2015, Auchentoshan got more and more popular. And at one point they had several year run where they became one of the most popular single malts for bartenders, creating cocktails and blends, house blends, because it had this lighter touch to it that you didn't have to struggle with all the other ingredients. Sometimes people refer to it as a breakfast whiskey, just because it's kind of gentle and approachable and sweet. But here's the thing. Don't let that fool you, because it's got body. It's got legs, and she knows how to use them. But keep in mind, this is cool. This is a great whiskey. This is a distillery that served, and by the way, I'll finish that real quick, just to go back. Vanilla, honey cream, slight cut grass. Soft sweetness on the palate, lingering caramel, that's it. On this nose, earth, toasted citrus, like greenhouse floral notes, and some fruits. And on the palate, depth, a little more oil, soft berries and cream, little zesty. That's beautiful. This is a distillery that survived bankruptcy, bombs and a complete reinvention of everything that the brand stood for, has books that say output lost due to enemy action, and then kept going. And that's pretty rock and roll. Cheers to you. I'm really glad you're here. If you like a channel that was definitely not bombed and did not lose output to enemy action, but drinks good whiskey, like and subscribe.